Genesis chapter 2. We'll go to God's Word, and we've been doing this series in the last few weeks on the opening chapters of the Bible, on the opening chapters of the book of Genesis, called In the Beginning. And it's at the beginning that we get the answers to most of the most fundamental questions of life. Who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? It's all answered in the beginning. Thank God He's given us the story of the world from the beginning itself. He answers those questions. It's all here in these first few chapters of Genesis. And so that's why we're taking some time in these weeks to go through it in a fair amount of detail, the first few chapters of Genesis. And so first of all, we talked about God. God is the main hero, the main player, the main actor, the main character in the Bible, in history, in the world. He's introduced in the first 4 words of the Bible. In the beginning, God. Right? You miss God, you miss everything. Then we talked about creation, how God creates the universe. He creates it in 6 days. He creates it from words that come out of His mouth. And things come into being, stars and planets and galaxies and kangaroos that hop and bumblebees that buzz and flowers that grow and mountains and lakes and valleys and everything else. It all comes from a word from His mouth. It's good. He creates it good. A good creation from a good God given for our enjoyment and for His glory. We talked about that. And then last week, very important message. We talked about ourselves. Human beings, the crown of God's creation. The last thing that God's created is us. And He creates us special. He creates us in His own image. That means that we resemble God. Can you believe that? We actually are like God in so many different ways. And He's created us in His image, in His likeness, to represent Him. He's given us a job to do on the earth, right? This is what we talked about last week. To develop the earth, to care for the earth, right? To see the whole earth resounding to the praise and glory of God. And that was the goal from the beginning. That's what we see in the book of Revelation at the end. That goal has never changed. Okay, we're all a part of this. That's what we talked about last week. And this morning, we come to the end of God's creation week. Okay. And the story of creation, starting in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it has a very surprising, interesting end. And an amazing application for ourselves today. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about this morning. And so if you look at Genesis chapter 2, so the story of creation, starting in Genesis 1, it spills over in the second chapter of Genesis. And so we'll read Genesis chapter 2, starting in verse 1. It says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the 7th day, God had finished the work He had been doing. So on the 7th day, He rested from all His work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it He rested from all the work of creating that He had been doing." Very interesting. What does God do on the 7th day? So it's for 6 days. He's been creating everything that exists. And on the 7th day, the last day, what does He do? He rests. Now, if you just think about that for a moment, that's quite a strange thing for God to do, isn't it? Why does God rest? Why does God need to rest? What does it mean that God rested? Well, one thing it definitely does not mean is that God was tired. Right? And so He says, "I'm done, I'm going to bed." Right? Definitely does not mean that. In fact, Isaiah 40, verse 28 says, "The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary." Psalm 121, "He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, He who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep." Okay, God doesn't need sleep. He doesn't get tired. He doesn't even get weary. What is this whole resting that God is doing? Well, this is the way I would put it. What is this rest that God is doing? Well, God's rest means that he is the joyful king of the universe. God is the joyful king of the universe. What do I mean by that? Well, there's some interesting parallels here if you just think about it for a minute. Do you remember what Jesus did after he completes the work of salvation that he came to the earth to do, dying on the cross, rising again? Jesus ascends back to heaven, and what does he do when he reaches heaven? What does he do? He sat. The work is done, and now he sits at the right hand of the Father. The work is done, now he sits. When my work is done, this morning, right? Preaching, praying, whatever else I'm doing this morning, then I'm going to sit. And I think it's a very similar kind of idea, right? God finishes the work of creation, and then what does he do? He sits down, so to speak, not to sleep, not because he's tired, not because he needs a break, right? But now he sits on his throne to rule over his creation, to sustain it, to nurture it, to enjoy it. I think this is what is happening here. So God's rest does not mean that he's inactive. Right? In fact, John chapter 5, verse 17, Jesus says, "My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working." Right? It doesn't mean that he's not working. God is at work. If God has stopped working, then the universe would fall apart. Can you imagine how much work it is to take care of all the trillions of stars and billions of crazy people like you and like me? Can you imagine how much work that is? Right? God is definitely at work, but it's not that he's hurried or that he's worried or that he's upset or anxious or fretting or flustered in any kind of way, right? God's work is a restful, joyful kind of work. He's the joyful king of creation. Another way to say that very simply is that God is a happy God. Wow. God is he's not a grumpy God. He's not a flustered God. He's not an anxious God. Right? He's a happy God. At the core of who God is, he is the joyful king of creation at rest, even as he does his work. Okay, so that's the first thing that we learn here about God's rest. He's the joyful king of the universe. But there's another thing that's also very interesting and also very important, I believe. I don't know if you noticed in the description of the seventh day of creation, there's something missing. It's there on every other day of creation. The first 6 days, it's there every day. But there's something missing on the seventh day. Okay, in fact, let me just show this to you. If you turn back to Genesis chapter 1, if you look at verse 5, Genesis chapter 1, verse 5, it says, "God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening, and there was morning the first day." Okay, look down at verse 8. God called the vault sky, and there was evening, and there was morning the second day. Look at verse 13. "And there was evening, and there was morning the third day." Are you seeing a pattern here? Right? If you look at verse 19, "And there was evening, and there was morning the fourth day." Look at verse 23, "And there was evening, and there was morning the fifth day." If you look at verse 31, "God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning the sixth day." Okay, now let me read the description of the seventh day again. Chapter 2, verse 1. "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created. When the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, now no shrub had yet appeared," and on and on. The description of the seventh day is over, but there's something missing. Did you notice that? Every other day, there was evening, there was morning, and the first day, the second day, third day, and so on. The day is done, there's evening, there's morning, and the next day starts. The seventh day, there's nothing like that. Did you notice that? And Bible scholars have pointed this out. Definitely if you were an ancient Israelite reading this, you would have said, where is the evening and the morning of the seventh day? It's missing. What does this mean? Well, most commentators, Bible scholars, theologians, what they say is this: God's seventh day, it didn't end. It's still going. In other words, God's rest lasts forever. God's rest lasts forever. It's not like he finished the sixth day, work is done, let me go take a nap, let me take a day off, and then eighth day, he gets up early in the morning and starts working again. God has been at rest, like I said, working, right? But at rest, fundamentally at rest, ever since the seventh day. Right? And in fact, if you now skip over in your Bibles all the way to the New Testament. In fact, we're going to spend the rest of our time this morning in the book of Hebrews. Okay? Because Hebrews picks up and kind of interprets Genesis chapter 2, the seventh day for us. So Hebrews chapter 4 is basically a whole chapter on God's rest. And what does that mean for us? Okay, and you see the same thing here if you look at verse 3. So this is now Hebrews chapter 4, verse 3. It says, "Now we who have believed enter that rest, just as God has said, so I declared on oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest, yet his works have been finished since the creation of the world. For somewhere he has spoken about the seventh day in these words, on the seventh day God rested from all his works." And then again in the above passage he says, they shall never enter my rest. God has been resting. Since the creation has been finished, God has been at rest. He's been enjoying his position as the joyful king of the universe since then. Right? In fact, I'll show you a couple of other passages. Psalm 115, verse 3 says, "Our God is in heaven. He does whatever he pleases." Isaiah 46, 9 and 10, "I am God. There's no other. I am God, there's none like me. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand. I will do all that I please." God is the joyful king of the universe. Of course, he has to judge sin. Of course, he sometimes allows suffering into our lives, but he's in control of all things, right? Not hurried, not worried. Like I said, God is at rest. Happy God, joyful king of the universe. And now the amazing thing, how does this relate to us? What does this mean for us? Well, this is what we're going to see for the rest of our time in the book of Hebrews as it picks up on this theme of God's rest. It's this: God's rest is available for us today. God's rest is available for us. God invites us into his rest. God is at rest. He is a joyful king. He's at work, but he's at rest. And he says to us, "Come, join me." And this is the rest that the whole world is looking for. This is the rest that our souls have been longing for our whole lives. find rest. Well, what is this rest? What does it mean for us to enter God's rest? Okay, we understand maybe that what God's rest means. He's the joyful King of the universe and so on. But what does it mean for us to enter into that rest? Well, first of all, like God, it doesn't mean that we stop working. It doesn't mean retirement. Right? If you were here last week, we said, if you remember, even in paradise, even in the Garden of Eden, God gives Adam and Eve a job to do. Do you remember that? Right? Even paradise does not involve lying on your bed, AC full blast, Coke in one hand, TV remote in the other hand, watching movies all day. As appealing as that sounds. Right? God created us to work. It's a good thing. It doesn't mean not working. It doesn't mean being inactive. It doesn't mean retirement, lazing around. Right? It also doesn't mean physical rest, or at least merely physical rest. Right? If you're physically tired, if that's your problem, and that probably is a problem for most of us in this room, we're tired. Our bodies are tired. We're exhausted even. Right? But there's a simple solution for that. If you're physically tired, then you can go home after church this morning, have a good lunch, and then take a nap. You'll wake up feeling much better. It's true. In fact, I recommend it. Right? Sunday afternoon is the best time to nap. If you're physically tired, you take a nap, you wake up refreshed, you feel better, literally. That's all you need if you're physically tired. You take a nap. Do it this afternoon. Unfortunately, most of our problem isn't just that we're physically tired, right? There's more going on here, right? There's a tiredness inside, right? Our souls are tired. Our hearts are tired. Our minds are exhausted. Right? And what does it mean for us to enter God's rest? It's to find rest for our souls. That's what we're talking about here. Rest for our souls, rest for our spirits, rest for our minds. This is what God is offering. He's saying, you want rest, not just physical rest, although that's important and that's good, right? You want rest for your souls? I'm offering it to you. It's here, it's in my rest. You come and be with me. Enter into my rest and find rest for your souls. Your soul is tired. How long can you go on like this? God says rest is available. True rest, real rest, soul rest. Well, before we get to how do we get that soul rest, let me just take 2 minutes and talk about where does this tiredness come from in the first place? How did our souls get tired? Just a couple of thoughts, that I've been thinking about in my own life. One is worry. Right? My mind is worried. It's occupied. It's even moving. It's even racing. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, I said the word worry here, and then I put it down, and I thought, well, what exactly is worry? So I looked it up. Worry, according to the dictionary online, worry is being troubled about actual or potential problems. That's what worry is. Right? Being troubled about actual or probably even more likely potential problems. Right? What if this happens? What if that happens? Right? If only this would happen. If only that would happen. Or if it's already happening, why is this happening? Right? We're worried. It wearies the soul. It's exhausting. Right? Where does the soul tiredness come from? I think another thing that it comes from for a lot of us is is ambition. And I was going to say work, but then I said, work is not actually the main issue, it's ambition. Right? I cannot take a break. Day off, vacation, forget it. Right? I might miss a potential client. I might miss a potential sale. I might miss a potential opportunity. While I'm out there taking a break or taking a vacation, I'm falling behind. Others are getting ahead. What if I end up as a failure? Right? I can't take a break. I gotta keep moving. I gotta keep working. Even if I'm just sitting here, my mind is over there. Ambition. It's exhausting. It really is. And one more. Technology. We love this one, right? And this is getting bigger and bigger. And I was just thinking when I put this in, this can't just be a subpoint. Probably need to give a whole sermon, maybe even a series of sermons on this, right? This is a huge one for us. Technology. And for all of the amazing blessings of efficiency and effectiveness and connectedness and everything else that technology brings, it's also extremely destructive, isn't it? And of course, nowadays, this whole Facebook privacy is a big thing. Of course, internet pornography is like an epidemic affecting a whole generation, the whole world. We talk about those things sometimes and think about those things, but another aspect of this technology one is that the effect that it has on our souls in the sense of keeping us constantly busy. I can't rest. I can't shut my phone off. I can't even put it on silent. Right? And in fact, you might be aware that there's all these NGOs that have started recently and all these lawsuits that have been filed against some of these tech giants, Apple, Facebook, Google, and so on. A lot of these NGOs and lawsuits have been initiated by former employees of these companies because they know how these tech giants on purpose are keeping us addicted, especially to our smartphones. Right? They're creating technologies, they're promoting technologies that keep us checking our phones every 30 seconds. And if I can't check my phone for like 5 minutes, I feel empty inside. And that's why, it's in their best interest to keep your phone ringing and dinging and pinging and binging and everything else. And we're gladly, faithfully obliging. Wow. Right? Technology. Last thing at night, first thing in the morning, all throughout the day. Anyways, there's a lot more that we can say about that. My soul is tired, right? Let me give you this quotation. This is Blaise Pascal, brilliant mathematician, philosopher, and so on, who lived 400 years ago, okay? Maybe one of the most intelligent people who's ever lived, and by the way, he was also a very strong believer, okay? Now listen to what he says 400 years ago. Blaise Pascal says, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Did you get that? All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Now just put that in your brain and chew on it, maybe for a few hours later on. He's saying this 400 years ago. I can't sit. I'm restless. If I could only just sit. If I could only just think a little bit. If I could only take stock. I think that's the kind of thing that he's getting at. Right? If I could just focus. Instead of just running around all the time. He's saying this 400 years ago. Can you imagine what he would say today? Amazing. And so, God says, I've got a better way. Come into my rest. This is what your soul is longing for. This is the life that I've created you to live. How do we enter into God's rest? Well, first of all, let me say, we don't enter into God's rest, again, simply by taking a nap or by signing up for a meditation class. You know, and I think some of you know in this research that I was doing for my doctoral thesis, you're studying all these different movements. I attended endless numbers of classes, meditation, chanting, yoga, breathing, stretching, you name it. I was there. People are flocking to these classes, learning all these different techniques. And, you know, you do it, you really do feel at peace, at least for a few minutes, until the class is over, you roll up the yoga mats and you get back in your car and start driving on the road, and your peace is gone. Right? Thank God he gives us something better, something deeper, something real, something true, and it's not just a technique or it's not just some physical thing. Or how do we enter into God's rest? Well, you know, it tells us right here in Hebrews itself. If you look at chapter 4, verse 2, for we also have had the good news proclaimed to us just as they did. So let me just stop there. How do we enter into God's rest? First of all, it has to do with good news. In the original language, in the Greek, which the New Testament was originally written in, that word is the gospel. Right? What is this good news? What is this gospel? It's all about Jesus, isn't it? It's about how God loved us and how he became a man and entered into the world, took on flesh, and lived a perfect life and died the death that we should have died and rose again. And now he stands with arms open wide. And you know what he says? This is what he says. Matthew chapter 11, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart. You will find rest for your souls. Not just for your body, not even just for your mind, not some technique, not some breathing. Rest for your souls. Jesus has purchased it with his own blood. He's opened the way to God. And now I can come to God, and he receives me and accepts me. And he says, I'm going to be your father, and you're going to be my child. You're going to be with me forever. What do we need to do? Look at verse 2 again. For we have also had the good news proclaimed to us just as they did, but the message they heard was of no value to them. Why? Because they did not share the faith of those who obeyed. Now, we who have believed enter that rest. Right? It's not just that Jesus has done something 2,000 years ago in a faraway place. How do we get that? How do we connect with that? How do we receive that thing that he's purchased for us? We do it by what? Did you see it there? We do it by faith. We receive it by faith. We believe it. You know, I would guarantee you, even this morning, your soul is weary, your soul is burdened, just like Jesus has talked about. The moment, if you were to say, even right now, as you're sitting there in this hall, if you were to say, God, I've tried my best. I can't handle it. I'm overwhelmed. I'm in over my head. I give it to you. I surrender the situation, this person, this circumstance, this problem, my soul, my heart, my sin, my pain, my guilt. Lord, you take it. I know you can handle it. I believe that you can make something out of this mess. The moment that you do that, I can almost guarantee you'll find instant relief, immediate relief. Right? If you've never done that before, what's the harm in trying? Right? What's holding you back? If you're like most people, you've tried everything. Right? Jesus is giving you this promise. So many people have found rest in him. But, faith, it's talking about faith. It's talking about believing in Jesus. Faith, now please hear this. It's not just a one-time thing. Last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when I was a kid, I believed in Jesus. I put my faith in Jesus. I believe that he's my father. I believe that I'm his child. I'm a believer. I did that back then. Right? What does it mean to be a believer? Right? It means to believe every day. Right? Not just back then, right? But it means to continue trusting, depending, giving to Jesus, saying, I can't handle it, but you can handle it. And I'm trusting that you're going to help me. Right? I think so many of us believers, right? It's something we do believe, right? We are true believers. We've given our lives to Jesus, but in the practical, everyday aspects of life, we're just living like everybody else is living. Using our own education, our own connections, our own experience, our own money, right, to solve the problems that we're facing. And yet this is the bridge. This is where faith becomes practical, right? That same Jesus who died on the cross for my sins and rose again so many years ago, he's the same Jesus that I'm trusting in right now in this situation. And in fact, let me summarize it first. How do we enter into God's rest? By believing the good news of Jesus. Right? Sounds so simple. It's almost too simple. But give me the secret of peace. Give me that technique. Give me that knowledge. Most of us have probably heard this so many times already. Believe in Jesus. And not just one time back then, but every day. Believe in Jesus. Trust in Jesus. Right? And three gospel truths, right, that mean everything for me. And this list could be very, very long, but I just want to give you three, okay? Number one, God is in control of everything. Do you believe that? Do you really believe that? God is in control of everything. I probably say this to myself dozens of times every day. I start the day with this. And I continue to say this. God is in control. God is in control. God is in control. It's okay. God is in control. Oh yeah. God is in control. And it's true. Right? He's actually in control. Nothing has surprised him. Nothing has kind of left his hands. He's in control of everything. And not only is he in control of everything, but God loves me. Like we sang earlier, the God of angel armies is on my side. Is that just a song? Are those just words? the God of angel armies is on my side. All of that power is being harnessed for my good. Every day, in every circumstance, in every situation, no matter how out of control it might feel to me. Do you think this brings peace when you actually believe it? It changes everything. Right? This is what believers believe, right? This kind of thing. Believers believe it, and it gives them peace. It gives rest to their souls. This is how this whole walking with Jesus works. Right? Those two are probably enough, but then when you add this third one day I will go to be with God forever. You can even add a couple of extra words in between. One day, very soon, I will go to be with God forever. You just get a little bit of that perspective, that eternal perspective, into the situation. It completely relativizes it, doesn't it? Oh yeah. I'm going to be with God forever and ever and ever. I guess I can go on another day. Right? And I know that so many people are going through real hardship, pain, suffering, but this is the resources that God has given us, right? And like I said, I could give you hundreds of statements like this. We sang, I think in that same song, I'm holding on to your promises. Right? This is how we walk with Christ. Right? It's a walk of faith. It's a fight of faith. Right? But I'm holding on. And everybody's saying this, and this is how I'm feeling. And the bottom is coming out of my life, but I'm holding on. And I believe, Jesus, you're going to carry me through. And not only can I survive now, but I'm actually at rest. And more, day by day, as the months and the years go on, 5 years ago, this would have destroyed me. I literally would have been in depression. But now, somehow I've got this strange peace. That God is in control. And He loves me. And somehow, somewhere, and this is going to work out. It's going to work out for my good even. I don't see how, but I'm trusting. Right? And I'm growing in my faith. And it's having this very practical effect on my life. I'm at rest. And now other people are also noticing. So, let me close by just giving the practical effect of this. One is that when our souls are at rest by believing in Jesus and His promises, we can actually sleep. I'm meeting more and more people somehow lately that just sleep so poorly. I don't know how they live. And maybe that's you this morning. And I know there's lots of reasons maybe why people don't sleep well at night. Right? But one is certainly because of work and technology and ambition and some of those other things that we've talked about. And I've met some people recently, they literally dread sleeping. I can't understand that. I love sleeping. In fact, almost every single night, when the lights go off, I tell my wife, this is my favorite time of day. I love to sleep, but to meet someone who hates to sleep. And what I've been hearing, people, the lights go off and you're lying there and there's nothing to do. And now all those problems, all those anxieties come and so what do? They keep working and working and watching and staring until literally their eyelids close. And then they just lie there for the rest of the night. Oh. Actually, look at this. Psalm 3, this is David. He says, Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him. But you, Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, the one who lifts my head high. I call out to the Lord, and He answers me from His holy mountain. And then what does He do after He calls out to the Lord? I lie down and sleep. and I wake again because the Lord sustains me. You know, over and over again, the Bible says that, talks about sleep as a gift from God. What better evidence of faith? And by the way, David is surrounded by people who want to kill him. They're searching for him. They're running after him to kill him. And he says, I call out to the Lord, and then I lie down and sleep. And then in the morning, when it's time to wake up, I wake up. Wow. You know, one last thing. This pattern that God shows us in that first week of creation, 6 days of work, 1 day of rest. You know, the Bible talks later on in the Old Testament about a Sabbath, right? And God commands his people to take 1 day, seventh day, you take a Sabbath, and there's certain things that are regulated there, and you know, people took that was supposed to be a gift, and they made all these extra rules and regulations, and it became a burden instead of a break. You know, and as people in the New Testament now, I don't believe that we have those Sabbath regulations. I believe that Jesus is our Sabbath rest. In fact, that's what it said in the book of Hebrews here. And yet, you know, that principle of taking 1 day off in a week is still a very, very helpful one, isn't it? Right? It's just a very good principle of life. And yet so many people can't do that. The phone is on, still taking calls, right? Just like maybe I said earlier, an evening off, can't have time with my family, can't really go on vacation without my laptop or without my phone on. Right? What is the evidence or the effect of a soul at rest? It's a mind that can rest. It's a body that can rest. It's a body that can sleep when it's supposed to sleep. Right? That can turn off the technology when it's time to turn off the technology because there's some things that are more important in life. And so, dear friends, do you have rest for your souls? Do you know that rest in your soul?